Chapter 7 The Blue Scout. I was dreaming an utterly nonsensical dream. Carol Tiggs was by my side. She was speaking to me, although I could not understand what she said. Don Juan was also in my dream, as were all the members of his party. They seemed to be trying to drag me out of a foggy, yellowish world. After a serious effort, during which I lost and regained sight of them various times, they succeeded in extricating me from that place. Since I could not conceive the sense of all that endeavor, I finally figured that I was having a normal, incoherent dream. My surprise was staggering when I woke up and found myself in bed in Don Juan's house. I was incapable of moving. I had no energy at all. I did not know what to think, although I immediately sensed the gravity of my situation. I had the vague feeling that I had lost my energy because of fatigue caused by dreaming. Don Juan's companions seemed to be extremely affected by whatever was happening to me. They kept on coming into my room, one at a time. Each stayed for a moment in complete silence until someone else showed up. It appeared to me that they were taking turns watching over me. I was too weak to ask them to explain their behavior. During the subsequent days, I began to feel better, and they started to talk to me about my dreaming. At first, I did not know what they wanted of me. Then it dawned on me, because of their questions, that they were obsessed with the shadow beings. Every one of them appeared to be scared and said to me more or less the same thing. They insisted that they had never been in the shadows world. Some of them even claimed that they did not know it existed. Their claims and reactions increased my sense of bewilderment and my fear. The questions everyone asked were, "Who took you into that world?" Or, "How did you even begin to know how to get there?" When I told them that the scouts had shown me that world, they could not believe me. Obviously, they had surmised that I had been there. But since it was not possible for them to use their personal experience as a reference point, they were unable to fathom what I was saying. Yet, they still wanted to know all I could tell them about the shadow beings and their realm. I obliged them. All of them, with the exception of Don Juan, sat by my bed, hanging on every word I said. However, every time I asked them about my situation, they scurried away, just like the shadow beings. Another disturbing reaction, which they never had before, was that they frantically avoided any physical contact with me. They kept their distance, as if I were carrying the plague. Their reaction worried me so much that I felt obliged to ask them about it. They denied it. They seemed insulted, and even went so far as to insist on proving to me that I was wrong. I laughed heartily at this tense situation that ensued. Their bodies went rigid every time they tried to embrace me. Florinda Grau, Don Juan's closest cohort, was the only member of his party who lavished physical attention on me and tried to explain to me what was going on. She told me that I had been discharged of energy in the inorganic being's world and charged again, but that my new energetic charge was a bit disturbing to the majority of them. Florinda used to put me to bed every night, as if I were an invalid. She even spoke to me in baby talk, which all of them celebrated with gales of laughter. But regardless of how she made fun of me, I appreciated her concern, which seemed to be real. I have written about Florinda before in connection with my meeting her. She was by far the most beautiful woman I had ever met. Once I said to her, and I really meant it, that she could have been a fashion magazine model. Of a magazine of 1910, she retorted. Florinda, although she was old, was not old at all. She was young and vibrant. When I asked Don Juan about her unusual youthfulness, he replied that sorcery kept her in a vital state. Sorcerer's energy, he remarked, was seen by the eye as youth and vigor. After satisfying their initial curiosity about the Shadow's world, Don Juan's companions stopped coming into my room, and their conversation remained at the level of casual inquiries about my health. Every time I tried to get up, however, there was someone around who gently put me back to bed. I did not want their ministrations, yet it seemed that I needed them. I was weak. I accepted that. But what really took its toll on me was not having anyone explain to me what I was doing in Mexico when I had gone to bed to dream in Los Angeles. I asked them repeatedly. Every one of them gave me the same answer. Ask the Nahual. He's the only one who can explain it. Finally, Florinda broke the ice. You were lured into a trap. That's what happened to you, she said. Where was I lured into a trap? In the world of the inorganic beings, of course. That has been the world you've been dealing with for years. Isn't that so? Most definitely, Florinda. But can you tell me about the kind of trap it was? Not really. All I can tell you is that you lost all your energy there. But you fought very well. Why am I sick, Florinda? You are not sick with an illness. You were energetically wounded. You were critical. But now, you are only gravely wounded. How did all this happen? You entered into a mortal combat with the inorganic beings, and you were defeated. I don't remember fighting anyone, Florinda. Whether you remember or not is immaterial. You fought and were outclassed. You didn't have a chance against those masterful manipulators. I fought the inorganic beings? Yes, you had a mortal encounter with them. I really don't know how you survived their death blow. She refused to tell me anything else and hinted that the Nahual was coming to see me any day. The next day, Don Juan showed up. He was very jovial and supportive. He jokingly announced that he was paying me a visit in his capacity of energy doctor. He examined me by gazing at me from head to toe. You're almost cured, he concluded. What happened to me, Don Juan? I asked. You fell into a trap the inorganic being set for you, he answered. How did I end up here? Right there is the big mystery for sure, he said, and smiled jovially, obviously trying to make light of a serious matter. The inorganic beings snatched you, body and all. First, they took your energy body into their realm. When you followed one of their scouts, and they took your physical body. And then they took your physical body. Don Juan's companions seemed to be in a state of shock. One of them asked Don Juan whether the inorganic beings could abduct anyone. Don Juan answered that they certainly could. He reminded them that the Nahual Elias was taken into that universe, and he definitely did not intend to go there. All of them assented with a nod. Don Juan continued speaking to them, referring to me in the third person. He said that the combined awareness of a group of inorganic beings had first consumed my energy body by forcing an emotional outburst from me to free the Blue Scout. Then the combined awareness of the same group of inorganic beings had pulled my inert physical mass into their world. Don Juan added that without the energy body, one is merely a lump of organic matter that can be easily manipulated by awareness. The inorganic beings are glued together, like the cells of the body, Don Juan went on. When they put their awareness together, they are unbeatable. It's nothing for them to yank us out of our moorings and plunge us into their world, especially if we make ourselves conspicuous and available, like he did. Their sighs and gasps echoed against the walls. All of them seemed to be genuinely frightened and concerned. I wanted to whine and blame Don Juan for not stopping me. But I remembered how he had tried to warn me, to deviate me, time and time again, to no avail. Don Juan was definitely aware of what was going on in my mind. He gave a knowing smile. "The reason you think you're sick," he said, addressing me, "is that the inorganic beings discharged your energy and gave you theirs. That should have been enough to kill anyone. As the Nahual, you have extra energy. Therefore, you barely survived." I mentioned to Don Juan that I remembered bits and pieces of quite an incoherent dream in which I was in a yellow-fogged world. He, Carol Tiggs, and his companions were pulling me out. The inorganic being's realm looks like a yellow fog world to the physical eye, he said. When you thought you were having an incoherent dream, you were actually looking with your physical eyes for the first time at the inorganic being's universe. And strange as it may seem to you, it was also the first time for us. We knew about the fog only through sorcerer stories, not through experience. Nothing of what he was saying made sense to me. Don Juan assured me that because of my lack of energy, a more complete explanation was impossible. I had to be satisfied, he said, with what he was telling me and how I understood it. "I don't understand it at all," I insisted. "Then you haven't lost anything," he said. "When you get stronger, you yourself will answer your questions." I confessed to Don Juan that I was having hot flashes. My temperature rose suddenly, and while I felt hot and sweaty, I had extraordinary but disturbing insights into my situation. Don Juan scanned my entire body with his penetrating gaze. He said that I was in a state of energetic shock. Losing energy had temporarily affected me, and what I interpreted as hot flashes were in essence blasts of energy, during which I momentarily regained control of my energy body and knew everything that had happened to me. Make an effort and tell me yourself what happened to you in the inorganic being's world, he ordered me. I told him that the clear sensation I got from time to time was that he and his companions had gone into that world with their physical bodies and had snatched me out of the inorganic being's clutches. Right, he exclaimed. You're doing fine. Now, turn that sensation into a view of what happened. I was unable to do what he wanted, hard as I tried. Failing made me experience an unusual fatigue, which seemed to dry up the inside of my body. Before Don Juan left the room, I remarked to him that I was suffering from anxiety. That means nothing, he said, unconcerned. Gain back your energy and don't worry about nonsense. More than 2 weeks went by, during which I slowly gained back my energy. However, I kept on worrying about everything. I worried mainly about being unknown to myself, especially about a streak of coldness in me that I had not noticed before. A sort of indifference, a detachment that I had attributed to my lack of energy until I regained it. Then I realized that it was a new feature of my being, a feature that had me permanently out of synchronization. To elicit the feelings I was accustomed to, I had to summon them up and actually wait a moment until they made their appearance in my mind. Another new feature of my being was a strange longing that took hold of me from time to time. I longed for someone I did not know. It was such an overpowering and consuming feeling that when I experienced it, I had to move around the room incessantly to alleviate it. The longing remained with me until I made use of another newcomer in my life, a rigid control of myself, so new and powerful that it only added more fuel to my worrying. By the end of the 4th week, everybody felt that I was finally cured. They cut down their visits drastically. I spent much of the time alone, sleeping. The rest and relaxation I was getting was so complete that my energy began to increase remarkably. I felt my old self again. I even began to exercise. One day around noon, after a light lunch, I returned to my room to take a nap. Just before I sank into a deep sleep, I was tossing in my bed, trying to find a more comfortable spot, when a strange pressure on my temples made me open my eyes. The little girl of the inorganic being's world was standing by the foot of my bed, peering at me with her cold, steel blue eyes. I jumped out of bed and screamed so loudly that 3 of Don Juan's companions were in the room before I had stopped my scream. They were aghast. They watched in horror as the little girl came to me and was stopped by the boundaries of my luminous physical being. We looked at each other for an eternity. She was telling me something which I could not comprehend at first, but which, in the next moment, became as clear as a bell. She said that for me to understand what she was saying, my awareness had to be transferred from my physical body into my energy body. Don Juan came into the room at that moment. The little girl and Don Juan stared at each other. Without a word, Don Juan turned around and walked out of the room. The little girl swished past the door after him. The commotion this scene created among Don Juan's companions was indescribable. They lost all their composure. Apparently, all of them had seen the little girl as she left the room with the Nahual. I myself seemed to be on the verge of exploding. I felt faint and had to sit down. I had experienced the presence of the little girl as a blow on my solar plexus. She bore an astonishing likeness to my father. Waves of sentiment hit me. I wondered about the meaning of this until I was actually sick. When Don Juan returned to the room, I had gained minimal control over myself. The expectation of hearing what he had to say about the little girl was making my breathing very difficult. Everybody was as excited as I was. They all talked to Don Juan at once and laughed when they realized what they were doing. Their main interest was to find out whether there was any uniformity in the way they had perceived the scout's appearance. Everybody was in agreement that they had seen a little girl, 6 to 7 years old, very thin, with angular, beautiful features. They also agreed that her eyes were steel blue and burning with a mute emotion. Her eyes, they said, expressed gratitude and loyalty. Every detail they described about the little girl, I corroborated myself. Her eyes were so bright and overpowering that they had actually caused me something like pain. I had felt the weight of her look on my chest. A serious query, which Don Juan's companions had, and which I echoed myself, was about the implications of this event. All agreed that the scout was a portion of foreign energy that had filtered through the walls, separating the second attention and the attention of the daily world. They asserted that since they were not dreaming, and yet all of them had seen the alien energy projected into the figure of a human child, that child had existence. They argued that there must have been hundreds, if not thousands, of cases in which foreign energy slips unnoticed through natural barriers into our human world. But that in the history of their lineage, there was no mention whatsoever of an event of this nature. What worried them the most was that there were no sorcerer stories about it. Is this the first time in the history of mankind that this has happened? One of them asked Don Juan. I think it happens all the time, he replied. But it has never happened in such an overt, volitional way. What does it mean to us? Another one of them asked Don Juan. Nothing to us, but everything to him, he said, and pointed at me. All of them then entered into a most disturbing silence. Don Juan paced back and forth for a moment. Then he stopped in front of me and peered at me, giving all the indications of someone who cannot find words to express an overwhelming realization. I can't even begin to assess the scope of what you've done, Don Juan finally said to me in a tone of bewilderment. You fell into a pitfall, but it wasn't the kind of pitfall I was worrying about. Your pitfall was designed for you alone, and it was deadlier than anything I could have thought of. I worried about your falling prey to flattery and being served. What I never counted on was that the shadow beings would set a trap using your inherent aversion to chains. Don Juan had once made a comparison of his reaction and mine in the sorcerer's world to the things that pressed us the most. He said, without making it sound like a complaint, that although he wanted and tried to, he had never been able to inspire the kind of affection his teacher, the Nahual Julian, inspired in people. My unbiased reaction, which I am putting on the table for you to examine, is to be able to say and mean it. It's not my fate to evoke blind and total affection. So be it. Your unbiased reaction, he went on, is that you can't stand chains and you would forfeit your life to break them. I sincerely disagreed with him and told him that he was exaggerating. My views were not that clear. Don't worry, he said, laughing. Sorcery is action. When the time comes, you'll act your passion the same way I act mine. Mine is to acquiesce to my fate, not passively like an idiot, but actively like a warrior. Yours is to jump without either capriciousness or premeditation to cut someone else's chains. Don Juan explained that upon merging my energy with the scout, I had truthfully ceased to exist. All my physicalness had then been transported into the inorganic being's realm, and had it not been for the scout who guided Don Juan and his companions to where I was, I would have died or remained in that world, inextricably lost. Why did the scout guide you to where I was? I asked. The scout is a sentient being from another dimension, he said. It's a little girl now, and as such, she told me that in order to get the necessary energy to break the barrier that had trapped her in the inorganic being's world, she had to take all of yours. That's her human part now. Something resembling gratitude drove her to me. When I saw her, I knew instantly that you were done for. What did you do then, Don Juan? I rounded up everyone I could get a hold of, especially Carol Tiggs, and off we went into the inorganic being's realm. Why Carol Tiggs? In the first place, because she has endless energy. And in the second place, because she had to familiarize herself with the scout. All of us got something invaluable out of this experience. You and Carol Tiggs got the scout. And the rest of us got a reason to round up our physicality and place it on our energy bodies. We became energy. How did all of you do that, Don Juan? We displaced our assemblage points in unison. Our impeccable intent to save you did the work. The scout took us, in the blink of an eye, to where you were lying half dead, and Carol dragged you out. His explanation made no sense to me. Don Juan laughed when I tried to raise that point. How can you understand this when you don't even have enough energy to get out of your bed? He retorted. I confided to him that I was certain I knew infinitely more than I rationally admitted, but that something was keeping a tight lid on my memory. Lack of energy is what has put a tight lid on your memory, he said. When you have sufficient energy, your memory will work fine. Do you mean that I can remember everything if I want to? Not quite. You may want as much as you like, but if your energy level is not on a par with the importance of what you know, you might as well kiss your knowledge goodbye. It'll never be available to you. So what's the thing to do, Don Juan? Energy tends to be cumulative. If you follow the warrior's way impeccably, a moment will come when your memory opens up. I confessed that hearing him talk gave me the absurd sensation that I was indulging in feeling sorry for myself, that there was nothing wrong with me. You are not just indulging, he said. You were actually energetically dead for 4 weeks ago. Now you are merely stunned. Being stunned and lacking energy is what makes you hide your knowledge. You certainly know more than any of us about the inorganic being's world. That world was the exclusive concern of the old sorcerers. All of us have told you that only through sorcerer stories do we know about it. I sincerely say that it is more than strange to me that you've become, in your own right, another source of sorcerer stories for us. I reiterated that it was impossible for me to believe I had done something he had not. But I could not believe either that he was merely humoring me. I am not flattering or humoring you, he said, visibly annoyed. I am stating a sorcery fact. Knowing more than any of us about that world shouldn't be a reason for feeling pleased. There's no advantage in that knowledge. In fact, in spite of all you know, we saved you because we found you. But without the aid of the scout, there was no point in even trying to find you. You were so infinitely lost in that world that I shudder at the mere thought. In my state of mind, I did not find it strange in the least that I actually saw a ripple of emotion going through all of Don Juan's companions and apprentices. The only one who remained unaltered was Carol Tiggs. She seemed to have fully accepted her role. She was one with me. You did free the scout, Don Juan continued, but you gave up your life. Or worse yet, you gave up your freedom. The inorganic beings let the scout go in exchange for you. I can hardly believe that, Don Juan. Not that I doubt you. You understand, but you described such an underhanded maneuver that I am stunned. Don't consider it underhanded, and you have the whole thing in a nutshell. The inorganic beings are forever in search of awareness and energy. If you supply them with the possibility of both, what do you think they'll do? Blow you kisses from across the street? I knew that Don Juan was right. However, I could not hold that certainty for too long. Clarity kept drifting away from me. Don Juan's companions continued asking him questions. They wanted to know if he had given any thought to what to do with the scout. Yes, I have. It is the most serious problem which the Nahual here has to resolve, he said, pointing at me. He and Carol Tiggs are the only ones who can free the scout, and he knows it too. Naturally, I asked him the only possible question. How can I free it? Instead of my telling you how, there is a much better and more just way of finding out, Don Juan said with a big smile. Ask the emissary. The inorganic beings cannot lie, you know. Chapter 8. The Third Gate of Dreaming. The third gate of dreaming is reached when you find yourself in a dream, staring at someone else who is asleep, and that someone else turns out to be you, Don Juan said. My energy level was so keyed up at the time that I went to work on the third task right away, although he did not offer any more information about it. The first thing I noticed in my dreaming practices was that a surge of energy immediately rearranged the focus of my dreaming attention. Its focus was now on waking up in a dream and seeing myself sleeping. Journeying to the realm of inorganic beings was no longer an issue for me. Very soon after, I found myself in a dream looking at myself asleep. I immediately reported it to Don Juan. That dream had happened while I was at his house. There are 2 phases to each of the gates of dreaming, he said. The first, as you know, is to arrive at the gate. The second is to cross it. By dreaming what you've dreamt, that you saw yourself asleep, you arrived at the third gate. The second phase is to move around once you've seen yourself asleep. At the third gate of dreaming, he went on, you begin to deliberately merge your dreaming reality with the reality of the daily world. This is the drill, and sorcerers call it completing the energy body. The merge between the 2 realities has to be so thorough that you need to be more fluid than ever. Examine everything at the third gate with great care and curiosity. I complained that his recommendations were too cryptic and were not making any sense to me. What do you mean by great care and curiosity? I asked. Our tendency at the third gate is to get lost in detail, he replied. To view things with great care and curiosity means to resist the nearly irresistible temptation to plunge into detail. The given drill at the third gate, as I said, is to consolidate the energy body. Dreamers begin forging the energy body by fulfilling the drills of the first and second gates. When they reach the third gate, the energy body is ready to come out. Or perhaps it would be better to say that it is ready to act. Unfortunately, this also means that it's ready to be mesmerized by detail. What does it mean to be mesmerized by detail? The energy body is like a child who's been imprisoned all its life. The moment it is free, it soaks up everything it can find. And I mean everything. Every irrelevant, minute detail totally absorbs the energy body. An awkward silence followed. I had no idea what to say. I had understood him perfectly. I just didn't have anything in my experience to give me an idea of exactly what it all meant. The most asinine detail becomes a world for the energy body, Don Juan explained. The effort that dreamers have to make to direct the energy body is staggering. I know that it sounds awkward to tell you to view things with care and curiosity, but that is the best way to describe what you should do. At the third gate, dreamers have to avoid a nearly irresistible impulse to plunge into everything. And they avoid it by being so curious, so desperate to get into everything that they don't let any particular thing imprison them. Don Juan added that his recommendations, which he knew sounded absurd to the mind, were directly aimed at my energy body. He stressed over and over that my energy body had to unite all its resources in order to act. But hasn't my energy body been acting all along? I asked. Part of it has. Otherwise, you wouldn't have journeyed to the inorganic being's realm, he replied. Now, your entire energy body has to be engaged to perform the drill of the third gate. Therefore, to make things easier for your energy body, you must hold back your rationality. I'm afraid you are barking up the wrong tree, I said. There's very little rationality left in me after all the experiences you've brought into my life. Don't say anything. At the third gate, rationality is responsible for the insistence of our energy bodies on being obsessed with superfluous detail. At the third gate, then, we need irrational fluidity, irrational abandon to counteract that insistence. Don Juan's statement that each gate is an obstacle could not have been more truthful. I labored to fulfill the drill of the third gate of dreaming more intensely than I had on the other two tasks combined. Don Juan put tremendous pressure on me. Besides, something else had been added to my life, a true sense of fear. I had been normally and even excessively afraid of one thing or another throughout my life. But there had been nothing in my experience comparable to the fear I felt after my bout with the inorganic beings. Yet all this wealth of experience was inaccessible to my normal memory. Only in the presence of Don Juan were those memories at my disposal. I asked him about this strange situation once when we were at the National Museum of Anthropology and History in Mexico City. What had prompted my question was that at the moment I had the odd ability to remember everything that had happened to me in the course of my association with Don Juan. And that made me feel so free, so daring and light-footed that I was practically dancing around. It just happens that the presence of the Nahual induces a shift of the assemblage point, he said. He guided me then into one of the display rooms of the museum and said that my question was apropos to what he had been planning to tell me. My intention was to explain to you that the position of the assemblage point is like a vault where sorcerers keep their records, he said. I was tickled pink when your energy body felt my intent and you asked me about it. The energy body knows immensities. Let me show you how much it knows. He instructed me to enter into total silence. He reminded me that I was already in a special state of awareness because my assemblage point had been made to shift by his presence. He assured me that entering into total silence was going to allow the sculptures in that room to make me see and hear inconceivable things. He added, apparently to increase my confusion, that some of the archaeological pieces in that room had the capacity to produce by themselves a shift of the assemblage point, and that if I reached a state of total silence, I would be actually witnessing scenes pertaining to the lives of the people who made those pieces. He then began the strangest tour of a museum I have ever taken. He went around the room, describing and interpreting astounding details of every one of the large pieces. According to him, every archaeological piece in that room was a purposeful record left by the people of antiquity. A record that Don Juan, as a sorcerer, was reading to me as one would read a book. Every piece here is designed to make the assemblage point shift, he went on. Fix your gaze on any of them, silence your mind, and find out whether or not your assemblage point can be made to shift. How would I know that it has shifted? Because you would see and feel things that are beyond your normal reach. I gazed at the sculptures and saw and heard things that I would be at a loss to explain. In the past, I had examined all those pieces with the bias of anthropology, always bearing in mind the descriptions of scholars in the field. Their descriptions of the functions of those pieces, rooted in modern man's cognition of the world, appeared to me for the first time to be utterly prejudiced, if not asinine. What Don Juan said about those pieces, and what I heard and saw myself gazing at them, was the farthest thing from what I had always read about them. My discomfort was so great that I felt obliged to apologize to Don Juan for what I thought was my suggestibility. He did not laugh or make fun of me. He patiently explained that sorcerers were capable of leaving accurate records of their findings in the position of the assemblage point. He maintained that when it comes to getting to the essence of a written account, we have to use our sense of sympathetic or imaginative participation to go beyond the mere page into the experience itself. However, in the sorcerer's world, since there are no written pages, total records, which can be relived instead of read, are left in the position of the assemblage point. To illustrate his argument, Don Juan talked about the sorcerer's teachings for the second attention. He said that they are given when the apprentice's assemblage point is on a place other than the normal one. The position of the assemblage point becomes, in this manner, the record of the lesson. In order to play the lesson back, the apprentice has to return his assemblage point to the position it occupied when the lesson was given. Don Juan concluded his remarks by reiterating that to return the assemblage point to all the positions it occupied when the lessons were given is an accomplishment of the highest magnitude. For nearly a year, Don Juan did not ask me anything about my third dreaming task. Then one day, quite abruptly, he wanted me to describe to him all the nuances of my dreaming practices. The first thing I mentioned was a baffling recurrence. For a period of months, I had dreams in which I found myself staring at me, sleeping in my bed. The odd part was the regularity of those dreams. They happened every 4 days, like clockwork. During the other 3 days, my dreaming was what it always had been so far. I examined every possible item in my dreams. I changed dreams. And occasionally, driven by a suicidal curiosity, I followed the foreign energy scouts, although I felt extremely guilty doing this. I fancied it to be like having a secret drug addiction. The realness of that world was irresistible to me. Secretly, I felt somehow exonerated from total responsibility, because Don Juan himself had suggested that I ask the dreaming emissary about what to do to free the Blue Scout trapped among us. He meant for me to pose the question in my everyday practice, but I construed his statement to imply that I had to ask the emissary while I was in its world. The question I really wanted to ask the emissary was whether the inorganic beings had set a trap for me. The emissary not only told me that everything Don Juan had said was true, but also gave me instructions on what Carol Tiggs and I had to do to liberate the scout. The regularity of your dreams is something that I rather expected, Don Juan remarked after listening to me. Why did you expect something like that, Don Juan? Because of your relationship with the inorganic beings. That's over and forgotten, Don Juan. I lied, hoping he would not pursue the subject any further. You are saying that for my benefit, aren't you? You don't need to. I know the true story. Believe me, once you get to play with them, you are hooked. They'll always be after you. Or, what's worse yet, you'll always be after them. He stared at me, and my guilt must have been so obvious that it made him laugh. The only possible explanation for such regularity is that the inorganic beings are catering to you again, Don Juan said in a serious tone. I hurried to change the subject and told him that another nuance of my dreaming practices worth mentioning was my reaction to the sight of myself lying sound asleep. That view was always so startling that it either glued me to the spot until the dream changed, or frightened me so profoundly that it made me wake up screaming at the top of my voice. I had gotten to the point where I was afraid to go to sleep on the days I knew I was going to have that dream. You are not yet ready for a true merging of your dreaming reality and your daily reality, he concluded. You must recapitulate your life further. But I've done all the recapitulating possible, I protested. I've been recapitulating for years. There's nothing more I can remember about my life. There must be much more, he said adamantly. Otherwise, you wouldn't wake up screaming. I did not like the idea of having to recapitulate again. I had done it, and I believed I had done it so well that I did not need to touch the subject ever again. The recapitulation of our lives never ends, no matter how well we've done it once, Don Juan said. The reason average people lack volition in their dreams is that they have never recapitulated, and their lives are filled to capacity with heavily loaded emotions like memories, hopes, fears, etc., etc. Sorcerers, in contrast, are relatively free from heavy, binding emotions because of their recapitulation. And if something stops them, as it has stopped you at this moment, the assumption is that there still is something in them that is not quite clear. To recapitulate is too involving, Don Juan. Maybe there's something else I can do instead. No, there isn't. Recapitulating and dreaming go hand in hand. As we regurgitate our lives, we get more and more airborne. Don Juan had given me very detailed and explicit instructions about the recapitulation. It consisted of reliving the totality of one's life experiences by remembering every possible minute detail of them. He saw the recapitulation as the essential factor in a dreamer's redefinition and redeployment of energy. The recapitulation sets free energy imprisoned within us. And without this liberated energy, dreaming is not possible. That was his statement. Years before, Don Juan had coached me to make a list of all the people I had met in my life, starting at the present. He helped me to arrange my list in an orderly fashion, breaking it down into areas of activity, such as jobs I had had, schools I had attended. Then he guided me to go, without deviation, from the first person on my list to the last one, reliving every one of my interactions with them. He explained that recapitulating an event starts with one's mind arranging everything pertinent to what is being recapitulated. Arranging means reconstructing the event, piece by piece, starting by recollecting the physical details of the surroundings, then going to the person with whom one shared the interaction, and then going to oneself, to the examination of one's feelings. Don Juan taught me that the recapitulation is coupled with a natural, rhythmical breathing. Long exhalations are performed as the head moves gently and slowly from right to left, and long inhalations are taken as the head moves back from left to right. He called this act of moving the head from side to side fanning the event. The mind examines the event from beginning to end, while the body fans on and on everything the mind focuses on. Don Juan said that the sorcerers of antiquity, the inventors of the recapitulation, viewed breathing as a magical, life-giving act and used it accordingly as a magical vehicle. The exhalation to eject the foreign energy left in them during the interaction being recapitulated, and the inhalation to pull back the energy that they themselves left behind during the interaction. Because of my academic training, I took the recapitulation to be the process of analyzing one's life. But Don Juan insisted that it was more involved than an intellectual psychoanalysis. He postulated the recapitulation as a sorcerer's ploy to induce a minute but steady displacement of the assemblage point. He said that the assemblage point, under the impact of reviewing past actions and feelings, goes back and forth between its present site and the site it occupied when the event being recapitulated took place. Don Juan stated that the old sorcerers' rationale behind the recapitulation was their conviction that there is an inconceivable dissolving force in the universe which makes organisms live by lending them awareness. That force also makes organisms die. In order to extract the same lent awareness which organisms have enhanced through their life experiences. Don Juan explained the old sorcerers' reasoning. They believed that since it is our life experience this force is after, it is of supreme importance that it can be satisfied with a facsimile of our life experience, the recapitulation. Having had what it seeks, the dissolving force then lets sorcerers go, free to expand their capacity to perceive and reach with it the confines of time and space.